I'm John McManus, and Ruth and I are going to be having a conversation about moving from print to digital in terms of reporting religious issues and religious news. And the reason why it's Ruth and I is that we both made the transition ourselves in some way. So I'll do a quick introduction of who I am. I'm currently the head of media for the Jesuits in Britain. The Jesuits are the largest Catholic global order of priests and brothers, and I'm the head of media for the British division of that, based in central London. And as part of that, we have lots of digital output and print output as well. So we've seen both sides of it. And previous to doing this job, I was a BBC reporter, and I did quite a lot of religion reporting there for online as well as for TV and radio. So I've seen quite a lot of these issues up close and grapple with them quite a lot of the time. So I'll attempt to provide some answers. Maybe I might provide more questions as well. And Ruth, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Ruth Gledhill, and I suppose I started out in journalism in the early 1980s. And it was my very first experience of journalism was for a little weekly newspaper called the Uttoxeter Advertiser, which was our local paper in the area where my father was a priest in charge, an Anglican priest. And this was a very traditional broadsheet weekly newspaper that was mainly read by the local farming community and the local townspeople. Uttoxeter was a market town with a racecourse and lots of a massive farming community. And we had advertisements on the front page still. I used to help out there as a reporter during my journalism training. And it was old hot metal press. And the presses were in a converted cowshed, or what seemed to me looked like a converted cowshed in the market square in Uttoxeter. And we, the journalists, there was only really me and the editor, and who was a lady called Rosie, a local woman. And we would be involved in every aspect of the process. And I really loved that. I really loved print. And that was what drew me into journalism. I always knew I wanted to work in print. I was never really attracted to broadcast media. And I loved the feel of the newspapers. I loved the presses. I love the engagement, from the very foundation of the printing presses right up to the papers rolling off and out there. And, I really loved every aspect of it. Then my first job was on the local regional newspaper after I trained. I did my NCTJ pre-entry course. And then I got one of the last formal apprentices in the industry at the Birmingham Post and Mail. And again, this was a big regional newspaper group. And we were still starting up lots of local newspapers then. It seemed like almost every month or so we'd start up a new one. And as a trainee, apprentice trainee, I was very involved in all these startups. So I was regularly moving out to Sandwell and the local parts of the Black Country, and getting involved in getting these new weeklies off the ground. So it was very exciting, and I was really lucky to have that training. At both the Uttoxeter Advertiser and at the Birmingham Post and Mail, it was very normal for journalists to supplement their income by selling the stories that they did for the local paper to the national press. And you'd tip the press national. You wouldn't write the stories for them, but you'd tip them off. And they would then do their own research and make the stories their own, and you would get a tip-off fee. After leaving university, and college, I didn't finish my degree, but I did go to university. My overdraft was bigger than my salary, which was about £2,000 for my first year at Birmingham. So, we all needed the extra income from selling our stories just to survive, really. Or I certainly did. And so then I sold lots of stories to the Mail. So I then went up to the Daily Mail after my indentures were over. And then you will all know, I assume, about the computer revolution introduced by Rupert Murdoch. And after the switchover, there were a lot of changes in jobs at the Times. So I moved to the Times as soon as the dispute ended, and Charlie Wilson took me on. He was then the editor. And we had the first computers really on our desks at the Times. And that was when it all began. In the 1990s, so I moved to the Times in 1987. In the 1990s, the internet started up. I was already by that point the religious affairs correspondent on the Times. And I remember the very first people who were accessibly online were like university libraries in America. And it was so useful for me already because before, if I want, I loved writing about, say, encyclicals, complex religious texts. I loved really digging deep into theological stories that came out regularly from Church of England, the Roman Catholic Church, and the Orthodox Church, and increasingly from Islam as well. And up until that point, the only way to research these effectively had been using the resources of the libraries, the Bodleian, the London Library, even the British Library. And believe it or not, we used to have at the Mail and at the Times cars, chauffeur-driven cars, and then motorcycle couriers who you could write out a little sheet of paper and send them off, and they would go and get a book for you that you could just phone these places up, and they would lend, always happy to lend the Times any number of books. And so you get these books, all papers, academic papers, that kind of thing. But suddenly, I was a very early adopter of the internet. Suddenly I was able to use my very basic computer. I had a Tandy laptop. In 1987, I also ran the London Marathon, which was part sponsored, the Mars London Marathon, which was part sponsored by Tandy. Soon after arriving at the Times, I ran that marathon. And then, so Tandy was kind of the way forward then. Probably nobody's heard of Tandy now. I don't know, probably they have. But and we had these massive desktop computers. And we had to share them with other people, so I felt like I was always fighting with my colleagues for access to the computers because we all needed to be on them all the time. It was already changing, really. And so I found that I could access these university libraries in America using this computer. And everything began to change from that moment, really. The Telegraph was the first, I believe, that came online with a really top-class website. We were very quick, though, to follow, but the Times was also very quick to go behind a paywall and to adopt a subscription model. We all had to adjust a lot to the way we worked. So that's a little bit of the history. I'm sure you're all familiar then with how fast everything moved and has moved. And that now the latest development, of course, is the advent of artificial intelligence and websites like ChatGPT.
Yes.
So
thanks, Ruth. You've seen it all, really.
like you have too.
Well, I think you've seen more than me. I think just to make clear to everybody who's tuning in, you're now a senior journalist at the Tablet Catholic weekly magazine, which is also online. And of course, you've got all that experience at the Times, which is a famous print newspaper, which, as you now say, is also online and behind a paywall and constantly bombarding us with subscription offers. That's the Times, not you. But it's very different, isn't it? And I wonder, you spoke then, something really struck a chord with me there, where you said, when you're doing religious stories, the very nature of it is that some of it's quite obscure and you really have to dig for religion stories. It's not like politics where they're handed on a plate to you every hour, Monday to Friday, by political parties and pressure groups and think tanks. With religion stories, you have to dig. And so being online, does make that a lot easier, doesn't it? Because you can find your resources from all over the world, particularly, for example, when it comes to Christianity in the States. But I wonder, when you're writing for things about the Catholic world in the tablet, for the print edition, which is delivered weekly, do you write it in a different way for online? Are there any differences?
Well, it depends. So within the print edition of the tablet, there's a number of sections. So I suppose what the tablet, which is the second oldest continuously published print magazine in the world after the Spectator. So we got it. I'm really proud to work for the tablet. And funnily enough, when I was on the Times, I always thought, one day I would really love to work for the tablet. So in the tablet, there, unlike a newspaper, which would have its news at the front, and on our website, we do have the news at the top of the website, though, that might not necessarily always stay there. But the tablet has its comment on page 2, just inside the cover, our editorial comment. And then we go straight into our serious think pieces, our features, our commissioned features, which are really, I always think, so beautifully written and such a good read and so full of information. I don't often, in fact, I haven't done one of those for quite a long time, but I do the occasional book review, which follow the features and books and arts. And then, but where I'm mainly involved is still on news, which has always been my specialism, I suppose. And so I'm writing news stories, which do go up online as well. And so the way the tablet works, on one of my jobs as assistant and online editor is to upload the print edition to the website every week. And I do that on a Wednesday. And there are slight changes that one has to make, even with the print edition, in uploading it to the website, although the paywalled content is pretty much the same. But when I make changes to it, it's normally to fit in with requirements of SEO, search engine optimization. So in news, we will be, the news team and I will be pretty much, working a 5-day week, like I always have done. And we will, it'll be rolling news. And the internet has very much changed how we do that, even on a weekly magazine like the tablet, where news is not at the front. We will still have a rolling, not quite 24 hour, because obviously we're not working 24 hours a day, but our work day is not constructed according to a print deadline at 4 p.m. and having to have our schedule lines ready for conference at 11 a.m. like it always used to be at the Times for me when I was there. Now you just, as soon as a story breaks anywhere, you have to respond to it and do your own version for the tablet. And that's where we try and bring our specialist expertise to bear. And we always do try and dig down a little deeper. And we try and give voices to those organizations that might not get the prominence we feel they merit. We give voices to organizations such as yourself, John, and to CAFOD and to SCIAF and to Caritas and, all these incredible institutions of the Catholic Church doing so much for the common good in our world, who might not get such prominence in the secular national press. We believe that we can give them real prominence with using simply the words that all of you say, and then enhancing their impact through the use of the many tools that the internet gives us, such as SEO. When I was made redundant with my pleasure and cooperation by the Times very generously part-funded a master's in digital journalism for me at Goldsmiths. So I went off and did this master's, which took me 2 years. I did it part-time so I could carry on working while I was doing it. And at that time, I worked for Christian Today, an US-based online-only iteration. And I ended up as editor of that before joining the tablet soon after. what I felt I wanted to do that digital masters, which I'd read some really good things about in The Guardian and other papers, because I felt as though I loved print. And although I was an early adopter of everything internet and really loved it, the internet, I felt as though I needed to upgrade my internal software, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
And it was really fantastic in doing that, But so I learnt basic programming skills, and I just learnt a slightly different way of doing things. And digital natives, obviously wouldn't need to do something like that. Although I think that Digital Masters is a fantastic course, and anyone who wanted to be a journalist in the modern age would benefit for it, especially if you were going to work for websites. But it'd be wrong also to write off print. I think, like books, still have a very big place in the world today. I believe the same is the case for print iterations such as ourselves, and that there will continue for a long time, if not permanently, to be a place for us.
So can I ask you, Ruth, just sorry to interrupt, but can I ask you, if you were writing a story, let's just say about something the Pope has said, and it's gonna go in your weekly magazine, which comes out on a Friday, I think, but you also want to get a piece up online, and you want to get it onto your social media. Are there different ways you do that? I mean, there's different ways we do it here, which I can share in a moment, but I just wondered if you would approach those different ways of doing this story differently.
Well, I would say that there is what I would call a workflow. There's a workflow which the same story progresses along. So I would say this is one way of doing it. It's a single way, but this way has different stages on it. Some papers still have different staff for online and for print. And when I arrived at the tablet, that was the case here as well. But I believe that is a waste of resources, and that it is much more effective from cost-benefit reasons, and for general overall coherence and understanding of what everybody's doing and what's going on, that it's much more effective if a story can be managed on one way. So the workflow of a story. So we might see it on the Vatican website. There might be a speech might appear, or it might appear in Google News, in a newspaper or another publication. Anywhere we might get a letter. We still get letters, or an email, or a phone call. People still do use these means of communication, or somebody might tell us something at an event, and then we want to follow it up. So the first, for me, the priority still, as we are a subscription-based organisation, the website does not make money independently, but is a good window into our subscription organisation, which is where you can find the really unique coverage that an organisation like the Tablet can offer. The first thing I always think of is, how do we do this for print? So that is my priority. Rising up in priority, and very important, is digital, because digital is a way of promoting what's in the print, but it's also important that our profile is high out there on the internet. So obviously that is a priority, but in a way, print is still harder than digital. So it's important to get your head around that first, and the processes for that first. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but compared to writing for print, digital, to me, it feels very easy, And I know. So I find it good training, a good practice for me to forge a story. And I've always looked at it as a trade, building, like a bricklayer building houses, or a blacksmith forging things. I find it good practice to forge a story as if I'm writing for print. And so there's a really good discipline there, because, as editor of the home pages in particular, but also assisting Patrick Hudson with the foreign pages, or we help each other really. We've got a fair number of pages there at the back of the Tablet magazine that we have to prepare copy for every week. And each one of those stories has to have an online iteration as well. So the priority would be to commission. We have a number of correspondents all over the world. We also write them ourselves, to commission or to write a story for print and to get that in the bag and ready. But then on the way to getting it ready for print, I find it useful to do an online version. So the online version can be longer. It can contain more information in it. It can, or not necessarily more information, but the information can be less compressed. And it can be, if someone issues a press release full of long rambling quotes, like people love to do, you can put in almost the whole thing, apart from the really repetitive or the really terrible stuff. You can put, if there's stuff that just isn't relevant or is not enhancing the story in any way, you can leave that out. But most of it you can put in, and I always like to put in as much as possible for online, and that's a real luxury of online. And because Google search engines don't pick up stories that are too short, and many of our print stories appear in a version that actually goes under the word counts that is required to grab the attention of the Google search engines. So it's really important that we have longer versions of those stories for online. Like all people who, think of themselves as writers in a way, I like to, write at length. I like to indulge myself and write at length. Yeah. It's a discipline to have to keep my stories short enough as required for print. Yeah. So it's a really enjoyable luxury of online, that you can let go a little bit and let your stories go on, and give people that you're quoting in the stories the space to speak as much as they want to. And you can also include links, you can include appeals, you can let people promote their books, all kinds of things. So it's a real, I think online is a real luxury, and I really appreciate it.
Let's just touch on some of those things you mentioned about how you can use online to do other things like the appeals, for example. It's funny you say that you do your pieces for online are longer and your print pieces are shorter, because with the Jesuits, it's the other way around. So we have a magazine that comes out 3 times a year, which goes to supporters, which they don't have to pay for. But we have a number of different articles from around the world in there. And sometimes what we do is we make them shorter for the website. And the reason we do that is that our research for our audiences has found that people are less likely to stay with us for as long as they might do if they were sitting down to read a print publication. So we send this out, it comes through people's post boxes, and then they sit down, we assume, and at their own leisure, they read through all the pieces. Whereas we know that online doesn't work that way. People are often reading things, sometimes on a PC, but more often than not, on a phone. So they're on their commute to work and they're looking at something on a phone while they wait for their train to get into the station. And that's when we increasingly try to grab them. And some of the things we're doing in terms of our audiences is to expand our traditional audience. So our traditional audience is getting older. They are usually committed Catholics who go to church regularly, but the Jesuits have a vocation to reach out to other people as well. And so we're trying to reach younger people, perhaps Catholics who've drifted away or who go to Mass occasionally. Perhaps they're not Catholic, perhaps they're interested in spiritual themes. And we try to reach them very much through our digital output. So our print is for our more traditional audiences, and our digital, which is our website and our social media channels, are now mostly for those who we're trying to say, hey, come on board and have a read. And those people might then subscribe to Jesuits for Friends. Why do it digitally? Well, as you've mentioned, Ruth, you can reach a wider audience when you go digital. With print, you are tied a bit to who's buying the publication, but anybody can access your digital offerings at the touch of a button. You can also, it helps you reach out to a new, possibly younger audience. If you want to do that, people who are primarily getting their news or their updates on social media, rather than buying a copy of the Times in the morning or the Daily Mail. You also said, Ruth, that when you're online with your stories that you put on the web, you can embed links, you can use images, you can use video. Of course, we have a YouTube channel as well, so you can be more creative and give people a kind of more of an offering that they can go to. And I've also found it's useful for amplifying smaller bits of information, perhaps things that might not make a full print article, for example, but which you want to tell people about. And for example, if anybody's on the call and they are people who are writing newsletters for, I don't know, your parish or a diocese, for example, or a smaller group, it's really useful to have even just a small digital presence so that you can keep people up to date with what you're doing, even if you don't have the time or the resources to have to get everything in your newsletter, for example. The experience of the Jesuits is that, as I said, we have our magazine, which has been going for decades. We revamped our website with a dedicated news section. We're using Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube, and we've had different experiences with all of those. So as you probably know, the people using Facebook are no longer very young people anymore. They're kind of my age and maybe a bit older, but that's useful because we have a lot of interaction on Facebook. Twitter, we've grown our audience by consistently tweeting things that we're doing, and also partner organizations and things that they're doing, like the Jesuit Missions Charity or the refugee services that we work with. YouTube we've used for making our own videos, for example, about vocations, and we did have quite a big impact with those. But what we've found is that the downside is that you have to be really consistent to keep your audience. So if you have people who subscribe to your YouTube channel, they want to see new material quite a lot. And of course, unless you're a full-scale media organization, which we are, you can't do that. And one of the things that we've also found with Instagram, which I still find surprising, is that the most pickup we have with Instagram is with prayer memes. So we have scheduled Instagram so that we publish prayer memes, which are images, nice images of the environment or churches with, a Bible passage, for example. And those are incredibly popular. And they are much more popular than when we use Instagram to kind of tell people about some news about the Jesuits or about something that's happening in the world, which kind of tells me that people are using our Instagram because they want some nice prayer memes, perhaps to reassure them, perhaps to help them pray. So what I take from that is that know your audience. And in a way, we're still finding out about our audiences. And we have different audiences using different parts of our digital output. So it's important to find out who you're trying to reach, really. This example here is one thing we did on Twitter. So we have an archives for the Jesuits because they've been in Britain for more than 150 years. And when the Queen died, we had to think about what we could do to reflect that. And looking back through our archives, we realized that she'd visited one of our schools back in the early 60s. And luckily we had some pictures. So we wrote a kind of longer form piece digitally for the website. And we also put that in our printed magazine as well. But for Twitter, what we did was we posted the picture online with this very short amount of text and then a link for people to find out more. Now, I don't know if you can see that at the bottom of the page, but we didn't have a huge amount of uptake from that. It was like 30 likes, I think, and some reposts, but we tweeted it several times. So we didn't get a huge amount. It's not like a media organization where, thousands of people will click on the link. But it did kind of generate quite a lot of interest. And we did get people writing in about it as well who enjoyed reading about the Queen being at Beaumont College. So it was useful for us, and it gives us a way to tap into what people are concerned about at the time, like the death of the Queen, but also in a way using Twitter where they can read it on their phone on the way to work, on their commute, during their lunch break, and then we can guide them to something longer. And that's kind of a lot of what we do now to keep interest. because one of the things that, as I previously said, is that when you've got an audience, they expect you to be consistent. And I mean, they expect to get new things from you quite a lot. So with your magazine, Ruth, that's as read, because you've got a team of journalists who are working every week to do that. With us, it's slightly different, and we have to be more creative about what we do and the resources that we use. This is another example. The Catholic chaplaincy at Manchester University is run by Jesuits, so they have their own Twitter account there. They posted this a few days ago. They're starting to think about their Christmas services, and it's a really clever way of doing it. It's their Carols by Candlelight service, and they've used some really lovely, quite simple images of candlelit services from previous years, just to whet people's appetite. It might be really obvious, but I think the key to a lot of social media is that you use really, really good images, good quality images that tell people what you're trying to say and that are appealing. I mean, when I looked at that, when I first saw it on Twitter, my eye was drawn not to the text, but first to the picture. And then after I've looked at the picture, I read the text. And that kind of makes me stop when I'm scrolling and focus on what the Manchester University's chaplaincy is trying to tell me. Again, we've got Facebook there. We've been fairly successful on there in growing our followers. And some of the pros and the cons that I've realised. The pros are that you can start conversations when you're engaging with people digitally in a way that you can't with newsletters or print. And it humanizes the social media content. The cons are that, as I said, you need to be consistent. You can't start a Twitter account for your diocese or your parish and then post once a week, because people will forget that you're there. And you remember, you want to grow your followers and get them to engage. So you've got to give them a certain amount over time. That will differ to the size of your audience and what you've got to say, but it's something to be aware of. The other thing is, be aware, especially on Twitter, of getting into never-ending conversations or disputes with your followers, which can lead down a path which can be pretty dangerous. And my advice on that, in that respect, is if you want to have conversations with people, keep it short and sweet, and then point them to a place where they can register their views. So you will often have people who have an axe to grind about something you've done or something you haven't done. And if you can get them to go to places like Facebook or a place on your website where they can register their views, that can keep those slightly damaging public disputes off Twitter, for example, which can become quite toxic sometimes. And again, just coming back to you, Ruth, about the word count and the length when you're writing for digital. One of the things we always think about, is this going to be an essay, or is it something that you are hoping people will read quickly on the phone and then move on? And we know that digital attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. And I don't think there's any way of challenging that. You've got to kind of work with what people are prepared to do. So if you know that attention spans are short and you think people from your research are reading you on the phone, for example, or while they're on their laptop at home while watching Netflix, then perhaps your piece needs to be shorter. That's just something to think about. Visually interesting images. As you said, Ruth, you can embed links to places like YouTube or to other websites. And of course, whenever you're writing, you should always have a second pair of eyes, what's known as a sub in the business, a sub-editor. There are many papers are getting rid of theirs, I think. Is that right, Ruth? I think they are in some newspapers. I spot a lot of mistakes these days.
Well, we still put a lot of resources into our editing and sub-editing team, and I can't, I've been out. I left the Times in 2014, so I can't really speak now. But I think that the subbing operation, as far as I'm aware, in most print organisations is still well resourced, because it can be such a disaster if it goes wrong.
Mm. Yes.
If all kinds of perils await. The publisher of a badly subbed stories. So I think that
perils as well.
Well, exactly. I certainly was including that in my understanding. So I think that subs are still an essential part of the operation and will remain so for a long time. And the subs are, modern subs have a very good understanding of SEO and digital awareness, and they can work across, like we do, print and online.
Yeah. Have you found anything, Ruth, that you think, sometimes the whole digital thing is quite annoying and I'd like to go back to just doing print? I mean, I sometimes think that, I have to say, not because I'm not an avid user of digital platforms myself, but there is a simplicity to just sitting down and writing a story, isn't there?
I'll tell you something that happened once that really illustrated for me this changing world. So right when we were at everything was changing, still changing. I mean, everything's changed so fast. But around about the time, I think it was the 2008 Lambeth conference, I would say a relatively small number of Times readers then were using email on a very regular basis, let alone social media and everything. But we in the newsroom, we were really already really fully digital, but we still did get a lot of snail mail. I was sent a letter which had some pretty explosive information just before the Lambeth conference, which if we had run the story that it contained before the Lambeth conference, it could have had an impact on how the conference went. Who knows, but it could have done, maybe. I left London for Canterbury and nobody was opening my mail for 3 weeks while I was in Canterbury at the Lambeth conference. So I didn't see the letter till I got back.
Oh.
And then we ran the story. But I got all kinds of conspiracies floating around. Did the Times suppress the story because it wanted a particular outcome of the Lambeth conference?
Wow.
No, the answer was it was sent by mail, so we simply didn't see it. And if it had been sent by email, we would have seen it. And to me, that was an occasion where you had two worlds moving in parallel with each other, the digital world and the pre-digital world, and they were still both there in operation. Now I don't believe that happens so much now, if at all. Nearly everything now is sent by email, which is both a blessing and it's opposite, because where before you would have to sit down maybe once a day and open your mail. Someone of my status in an organization never had a secretary to do that for me, or an assistant. One of your first tasks when you got in would be to open your mail, and then there'd be mail deliveries, maybe 2 or 3 mail deliveries in the day. But there was a deadline to everything. Everything happened at a set time, and you came to rely on and work like clockwork around those deadlines that occurred right throughout the day, and sometimes on a really big breaking story, right up until the last edition went off the press at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning. You could still be in the office updating the story. But now with online, as you know, it never stops, and now instead of having to discipline yourself to open all your mail as soon as it arrives, which was always a pleasure for me. I loved opening I loved opening envelopes and seeing what was inside and exploring these wonderful contents, or reading personal letters from readers. Now, the email, it just never stops, does it? You're inundated the whole time. And so you have to discipline yourself to read it, maybe at a certain times in the day. But then, you can't if you don't read it and you miss an email, sometimes I tell you a very embarrassing thing. So just today at the Times, I've posted a blog by a tablet reader who is an Anglican priest, but a very loyal tablet reader, and who sent in this blog. He sent it in 18 months ago. And I know, I'm ashamed of myself. And I commissioned it. And then I don't know what's happened, some life crisis happened, and for some reason I missed those days' emails, and I never went back to them. I mean, I begged his forgiveness in a letter. I was clearing out some of my old emails the other day, and I found this blog, and I thought, oh no, he sent it to me, and I even had this long correspondence with him saying what we wanted and how to write it and stuff. And then I just ignored it, and hadn't posted it. And I was thinking, oh, I felt so bad about it. So now we've finally got it up on the site. but I find that kind of thing does happen from time to time, because I find it's really difficult just to stay on top of everything. And I don't think that's purely because I'm 63 years old, and in the kind of that particular stage of my life. I think it's because I think everyone must find this, and I don't believe I'm the only person making these mistakes. It's kind of overwhelming, really. It's overwhelming, the amount of stuff that comes in all the time. So I find it working for an organisation like the Tablet, and I'd like to take this opportunity to really apologise to this man and to anybody else who I've done this to. I'm really, really sorry, and I'm really trying to improve and to stop doing that and to get better at it. But
what would you advise to people listening there? Because you're right, when you're doing things digitally, you've got lots of information coming in at all times of the day and night. So, I mean, I think you mentioned there, is one thing you can do is say, I'm going to only check my email, I don't know, a certain time of the day or twice a day. I mean, and I've seen that advised elsewhere as well. Does that work? Because I physically can't stop myself checking my email.
If the editor, Brendan Walsh, sends me an email, I can't ignore it, I have to respond right away. So I can't not check my email. I have to keep an eye on it. But so I suppose I filter it out. I filter out. Some I'll think, I'll look at that tomorrow or later. But tomorrow or later might not come if there's a crisis or if something else takes over. And I think that's where I can have a problem, especially. And at the moment, a life at a print magazine like the Tablet is in many ways a lot better than not criticising the Times at all, but a lot more enjoyable than a daily newspaper, because it's a weekly print deadline, and that has a strong, reliable, steady routine. And I trained at the London College of Printing. My journalism training was in magazine journalism, and that was where I always felt my true vocation was for magazine journalism. And I can operate within the constricts of weekly deadlines. But it's very important when you've got a website as well and online, the demands of online, that you're also responding, especially with news, to the immediacy of a breaking news story. Even when an organisation like the Tablet wants to give more depth to a news story, bring something additional, find extra stuff to put in, we're not just doing sound bites all the time. Even then, you still have to try and be fairly responsive. You can't really, I shouldn't let blogs go for 18 months before I finally get around to putting them up online. So I'm still, even at my age, with all my years of experience, I'm still trying to find a way to manage this in a way that doesn't mean that I'm in front of a computer screen 24 hours a day.
Answering emails rather than doing journalism. Yeah,
exactly.
which is the problem. But there is a lesson in that, I think, for the people who are tuning in, which is that with your blog contributor, if you are going to ask people to contribute to what you're doing digitally or on print, obviously, you need to keep them on side, and if there's any problems, you need to come back to them, because they're giving up their time free, presumably.
For free they are, yes. You see, we obviously pay
keep them on side
and pay well for print magazine articles, but because the website is not an income generator, the news side of it anyway, because it's free to view, the news, and the blogs are free to view. Obviously, we don't pay our contributors, and we hope that they get a benefit.
Yeah.
Other benefits, from promoting their message or promoting their website, or simply for a prestigious organisation like the Tablet hosting their views. We hope that they benefit from it, but nevertheless they are giving up their time for free. And so I accept that it's sinfully discourteous of me to neglect and abuse our contributors by failing to respond to their contributions. I'm talking about the process, really. I'm trying to be synodal about it.
Yes.
Process orientated, not content orientated.